leaving to the NFL. You have transfer portal talk, and you've got, of course, the women, I think, beat Texas tonight in Austin, if I just saw correctly on Twitter. And OU lost at home to Texas yesterday in an abysmal performance, which I got to give credit, Parker, to Porter Moser for what he did. But anyways, I'm here with Parker Thune, Spencer Forsythe on the board. Parker, just take it away real quick. Let's get the ad read out of the way and let's roll with this bad boy.
Sounds great, folks. This installment of OU Insider Live is brought to you by Manscaped. Valentine's Day is knocking, and Manscaped is the remedy for what the Love Doctor ordered. His prescription is the all-new Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, which includes the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, as well as the Weed Whacker 2.0 nose and ear hair trimmer, Manscaped's liquid formulations, and 2 free goodies, the Shed Travel Bag and Boxers 2.0, because comfort is king. There's also the Manscaped Refined Cologne to top things off. It's the Valentine's Day touch to your grooming routine. Elevate your grooming routine and set the stage for a romantically smooth celebration. And for the bearded kings, Manscaped also brings the Beard Hedger Pro Kit, designed to shape your scruff effortlessly. It sculpts cheek lines and maintains beard styles, giving you that suave look for your romantic moments. You can get 20% off and free shipping with the code OU Insider at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com when you use code OU Insider, because your grooming upgrade awaits, ready to charm your Valentine's dates.
There you go. There it is. As I sit here and I retweet our announcement for the live. Look, I guess we got to start at you know what? We're burying the lead. Jim Harbaugh just left. I think that's
How about that?
That's the lead. I mean, what are we doing if we're not talking about it's college football? Everybody's like, what does that have to do with Oklahoma football? Sharon Moore is probably going to be the next head coach at Michigan. And let's put it to you this way. He's a former OU alum. And let's say Brent Venables 10 years down the line, 5, 6, 7 years down the line decides he wants to hang it up. If Sharon Moore's doing a good job at Michigan, that's my first call. Right? Right? Like, that's probably your first call. The experience, alumni, all that type of stuff. So it has a lot to do with Oklahoma. Plus, what does that do portal-wise? What does that do to Oklahoma and maybe some of the battles that they have in the 2025 recruiting? Now, I know there's probably not a lot, but there's going to be some. They just won a national title, Parker. So there's going to be something that crosses Oklahoma and Michigan as far outside of just Sharon Moore. Because they're going to need another OC, right? Like, their fans are throwing Joe John Finley out there. I've been looking and reading, and I thought that was interesting because he's a former tight end. They played together. There's some knowledge between each other, the friendship, all that type of stuff, which we both know that's not going to happen. Joe John Finley, he was going to leave. He would have left with Levy. So
they know how much he sucks as a recruiter, Brandon.
Yeah, well, we've heard that enough from OU fans, and I look, the Nate Roberts stuff doesn't help, but at the same time, Devon Mitchell, Caden Helms, who hasn't got to do a lot, but he was an elite guy coming out of high school. You got McIntyre, obviously you got Jake Roberts, which has a lot to do with Latrell.
Yeah,
but you still have a nice tight end room now, like a very talented tight end, young but talented, and they're going to get either Deshaun Brame or Lincoln Cure as we sit here today.
Yeah.
So
now, and here's where I stand on the whole Nate Roberts deal, Brandon. And obviously, with the news that he's visiting Miami this weekend and Oregon next weekend, rather than taking a trip to one of Oklahoma's big junior days, that's kind of been the prominent topic of the day over at OUinsider.com on the message boards. And look, here's what I can say. One, just because the kid isn't visiting doesn't mean he's out on OU or that OU isn't getting the kid. I'll say what I said last week. I don't know where he ends up at this point.
No doubt.
Several months ago, we all thought we knew. We all thought when he decommitted from Notre Dame that it was going to be pretty straightforward and that he would end up staying home and playing for the University of Oklahoma. Obviously, things very much, or that feeling very much grew stronger after the Sooners uh, were able to bring in his brother Jake via the transfer portal. But in talking to some folks over the last few weeks, especially since Jake committed, and many drew the immediate conclusion, oh, Nate's just going to follow, which obviously a very natural conclusion to draw and an understandable one. But there's also that feeling that, talking to some people close to that recruitment, that he just wants to get out of the state of Oklahoma. And, if whether or not that is the case remains to be seen. But I will say this: everybody wants to hold the position coach accountable when Oklahoma doesn't get XYZ player. And at the end of the day, there's not much more that Joe John Finley as an individual can do if a kid like Nate Roberts just doesn't want to stay in the Sooner State.
Well,
If his mindset is, I'm going to go blaze my own trail, I'm going to part ways with everything I've ever known, and I'm going to go be a legend, expand my horizons, and write my own legacy at a place that is new and novel and offers some degree of the excitement of the unknown, if you will. Uh, at that point, there's really nothing Joe John Finley can do about that, right? Like it's not always about a shortcoming, whether that be on an individual level or a program level. Sometimes kid just has his heart set on somewhere else. And again, I'm not saying that's the case with Nate Roberts. Again, as I said last week, we're a long way from the finish line. And
yeah,
at least that's what it seems right now. But I just already, like, I can see the way that this is going to be portrayed if he does commit elsewhere. And I want to get out in front of that and also acknowledge that Desan Brame and Lincoln Cure are very much in play for Oklahoma, as is Chase Lofton, a national top 20 prospect at the position in the industry composite. So the Sooners are not without options. It's not Nate Roberts or bust.
well, first let's dive into this part of the out of state thing. How many times have we heard that? Like early on, we heard it. Gentry Williams out of state, right? Like he was going to USC, he was going to Florida. Like those were the two schools he was going to. He wasn't going to play at the University of Oklahoma. He went to OU. Gerald McCoy was going to USC or Miami. He went to Oklahoma. David Stone was going to Michigan State or Oregon. He went to Oklahoma. Like Andrew Rame was going to Georgia. He went to Oklahoma. Like this is a tired trope that gets talked about so early, so often that I just kind of roll my eyes at it now. Like, okay, cool. So that means they want to take their visits. They want to enjoy the process. Cool. That's their prerogative. They've earned that right. And is it misleading sometimes to out of state teams and programs? Probably. But that's not the kid's intention. The kid's intention is to make the best decision for themselves. And when they take all those visits, particularly from the state of Oklahoma, for some odd reason, there's this narrative nationally that nobody wants to live here. Well, population trends say otherwise when you look at Oklahoma City and the Norman area and all that. A lot of people moving in here from California, New York, all that type of stuff. And the reason is it's not that bad of a place to live. And the university is in a really good spot between Oklahoma City and Dallas. It's a metro area of Oklahoma City, and Tulsa is only an hour and 45 minutes away. And you've got so much you can do there. And yeah, it sounds great to go out of state. It does. It sounds really cool and natural for 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. I was like that. I wanted to live in California when I was that age. I'm living in Oklahoma now. I did get out and go live on the East Coast for a while, but like I came back. And generally, these kids that grow up in this area, somehow, some way, they end up going to OU and or they end up coming back in the States. So like it's I get it, but it's so early that I just kind of roll my eyes at all this, Parker. I'm like, okay, cool. The kid's going to end up going to how many OU games this year to watch his brother? How many? Wait, almost every one that he's not taking a visit somewhere else for an official or a game with his one of his parents. It's his brother's last year. So there's that. The relationship they have with Latrell, that the relationship they have with Joe John Finley, that. And I know I read in here that, oh, well, nobody in the NFL runs the Bryles offense. Well, OU runs a variation of the offense. They don't run the old school Bryles offense that they don't use anything. It is compounded with things that they learned from Heupel, learned from Kevin Wilson, learned from Mangino, learned from uh, Chuck Long. Like those are Latrell learned from a bunch of people, from a bunch of different guys. So did Levy. Levy learned from Heupel. He learned from Frost. Like there's different guys that they learned from over their years that, and they go and they do all these other things with all these other coaches. They don't just run a strict Bryles offense. That's what it is. Everything has a variation to it now. So you can't sit there and say, well, if I'm a tight end, I don't want to go play there. That's one of the top tight ends in the country just signed with Oklahoma. One of the top transfer tight ends has transferred to Oklahoma and Bear Sharp. So like that doesn't make any sense right now. That type of talk, I get it. It's an easy cop out why, Nate Roberts doesn't want to play at Oklahoma. Well, what about Lincoln Cure? What about Deshaun Brand? Why are they so interested in Oklahoma? Why are all these other tight ends around the country so interested? Why does Oklahoma have a really talented tight end room now? Well, it's because it's actually tight end friendly if you have the right type of tight end. Stogner was a different type of tight end. He's an inline blocking tight end. He's an old school tight end. Old school tight end. That's not generally what the NFL uses nowadays. They use a lot of flex out tight ends. They use guys that can do both. And it's just different. And that's the type of offense they run. There's some pro set style into what Latrell does too. So I don't really believe that to be the case. I just think the kid wants to look around. And who can blame him? He's got family up in Ohio. Oregon's always going to be a hot spot with the jerseys and Nike and all the glitz and the glam that comes with Oregon. Miami, he's playing in a 7-on-7 tournament this weekend in Miami. Guess what normally the kids do when they're down there for 7-on-7 tournaments? They're probably going to host 300 different 7-on-7 teams. Like it's going to be ridiculous in Miami this weekend. And it's really cool for them that Battle holds a tournament right down the road. I've been to the 7-on-7s down there. I've been to the Under Armour camps down there where they do that. So it is what it is. But Nate Roberts isn't the only guy that Oklahoma's looking at in this class that's meaningful. Like there's a whole list, Parker, of 25 kids that are going to be there this Saturday for the Elite Junior Day, the first Elite Junior Day of the 24 cycle. And I'm talking about 2024 of the 25 recruiting cycle, the year of 2024. So kind of break that down, Parker. What are some of the guys you're looking at?
As far as the visitor list this weekend, we've kind of teased here and there on podcasts and even on this live stream last week some of the names that are going to be showing up. The full list is posted over on ouinsider.com. If you're curious, you're not a member over there, that's a great place to be right about now, especially with recruiting getting into full swing. There is no better place to stay up to date on Oklahoma football recruiting than ouinsider.com. We've had that visitor list compiled for almost 2 full weeks. So we've made additions, subtractions, revisions as necessary. But the guys that I'm paying attention to, Brandon, most recently, I've kind of taken an interest in what happens at the running back position in 2025 because you have a guy in Torrey Blaylock that is a very high priority for Oklahoma, and you have a guy in DeAndre Ryden, Tiger, down at DeSoto High School. That's also a very high priority for Oklahoma. But the visitor list at running back for this junior day includes the likes of Demarius Robinson from right up the road at Edmond Santa Fe High School, Kentrell Reinhardt from, I believe he's from the state of Ohio, if I'm not mistaken, and then Michael Turner Jr. from down in Fort Worth. So the Sooners have cast a wide net. DeMarco Murray has cast a pretty wide net for a position at which he's only recruiting one guy in the class of 2025. Well, I phrased that poorly. He's obviously recruiting a ton of guys for one spot. The Sooners' plan is only to take one running back in the class of 2025. It's going to be a smaller class overall. The Sooners are already pretty deep in the running back room as it is. And so you understand that maneuver. Plus, they've already got a 2026 commit, right, in Jonathan Hatton. So there's a lot to like about where the running back room sits, and there's not any particular onus to overstock, as it were. So
Yeah.
one running back spot in 2025, and I wonder who that goes to, Brandon, because it's really the one group right now where you look at it and there's not an immediately apparent answer. And maybe that's the wrong way of putting it. There are plenty of potential answers, plenty of guys that OU is in good standing with, but I don't really have a strong sense yet of who that running back commit is going to be.
I That's kind of the $1 million question at that position. We did this yesterday when we recorded the podcast, and the question is three guys you think could commit when they visit, and I believe I can't remember who I named. I don't remember who I named, Parker, to be honest with you. Do you remember? I think I said Tristan Haynes, um, Cole Breiler, and
Breeler, by the way, I did
Cole
clarify.
Breeler, yeah, Cole Breeler, and CJ Nixon were the three that I named. That if they all three show up, I think it's one thing to say you're going to be there; it's another thing for them to show up. So, um, I think those were the three I said. And then you asked, what running back do you think? And I think you said Michael Turner was the one you were looking at, and which makes sense. I mean, he's been to Oklahoma how many times? And I know Oklahoma feels really good about their chance there. And if that name does sound familiar to you guys, yes, that's the son of Michael Turner.
Is it
Uh,
really?
yes, that's the former Chargers running back, I believe. That's what I was told. I haven't specifically asked him, but that's what I've been told. So that he's the son of the former NFL running back Michael Turner, and I believe we can find that out on his profile. Um, so if
I'll
you go
check
in
it
your
out. I'll do some
yeah,
research.
I would do that. But I guess he would be the guy that I would lean to as far as because they haven't offered obviously. They haven't offered Demarius Robinson. That's the name I'm thinking of. Out of Edmond Santa Fe, and obviously he's the cousin of Xavier Robinson, right? Like so. Um, that one I think would be really easy if they did offer him, but I don't. It hasn't happened yet. So, I who are the other guys as far as running back goes that you feel Oklahoma is in a good spot for
I'm sorry. Who are the other what now?
running backs? You feel Oklahoma's in a good
Oh,
spot for
yeah,
25?
okay. We're still on the running backs.
Yes.
Again,
Well,
I
I
think,
mean, the ones that you think could commit. I mean, there's three guys that are going to be there this weekend, I believe.
yeah. Well, and I'm very, and I obviously I don't know what DeMarco Murray's personal feelings about his offer list is, and which of those guys he, whether outwardly or inwardly, prioritizes. He's not really somebody that he's not gonna go on and shout that to the world. Oh, I like this guy better than this guy, or this guy better than this guy. No, if he offers you, he's gonna develop a relationship. He's gonna make you feel like a priority. We've seen that before. He treats pretty much all the guys that he recruits the exact same. And so I like who wants to jump in the boat first, and how does DeMarco Murray handle that? Because for instance, let's say a guy like Demarius Robinson. Well, I guess he doesn't have an offer yet, so maybe that's a bad example. But let's say Michael Turner wants to jump in the boat with Oklahoma this weekend. You take that right off the bat, or do you wait and see and tell him, hey, slow down, let's loop back around when official visit season starts up this summer, because you're curious how things progress with a guy that I believe has a higher ceiling in Tory Blaylock. And
Mhm.
like, they're all good options, right? Now, you can't go wrong with any of these options, but it could be as simple as, oh, we have our answer who Oklahoma's running back in the class of 2025 is going to be within the next couple months here. Or we could be waiting until mid to late summer to find out who it's going to be based on how DeMarco Murray plays his proverbial hand.
By the way, it's Michael Turner Jr. So, um, it was the same one from the 2003 Wisconsin class.
How
I
about
believe
that?
it played in the NFL. Yeah. How
Yeah.
about that?
Now, consider for a moment that you are recruiting in the same class, two guys with NFL bloodlines, because not only is Michael Turner Jr. obviously the son of Michael Turner, but Tory Blaylock is the son of Derek Blaylock, who played running back in the NFL for many, many years.
Mhm.
So the genetics are strong.
Yeah. Yeah. And Oklahoma's in a decent spot for Blaylock. They've been by there twice in literally the last 4 or 5 days. Now, I want to make this clear. They didn't go in the same week. They went at the
Yeah.
end of last week. The new week starts on Sunday as far as the recruiting goes. And then they showed up Monday again, but it was Venables, so it was a head coach making the rounds this time. So I think that look, there or it's DeMarco this time. Venables was last week. But that to me is I don't if I'm an OU fan, I don't really worry about running back, to be honest. Like DeMarco's going to get his guy, and if he's not going to get that, he's going to get somebody out of the portal that's going to be really good, and that's what we've seen since he's been there. Remember the big hubbub of Kamar Wheaton, like, oh my god, he can't question of recruiting, and then Eric Gray shows up. It's like, okay, cool, whatever. So yeah, and look, Caden Knighton is going to be there out of Winniewood. Just recently decommitted from Vanderbilt.
He'll be
I,
there on
yeah,
February
yeah,
3rd,
yeah,
3rd of
in
February.
February. But I don't know how hard Oklahoma's really pushing there. I think he's supposed to be visiting Vanderbilt again here. Really, I think maybe even this weekend. I'm not sure. Which is an odd time to decommit, but it's because the running back coach left, so there was kind
Yeah.
of some issue there, and there are people around him that did not want him to decommit. They wanted him to stick it out and just kind of figure it out from there. And the kid just kind of, you know, pun intended, walked by the beat of his own drum, I guess. So, um, it is what it is. As far as I had this question posed to me in my mailbag the other day, and I thought it was an interesting one. Oklahoma's had a 5-star on the defensive side of the ball the last few cycles, particularly on the defensive line, mind you. But without position being specific, does OU land a 5-star on the defensive side of the ball in 2025 to make it 3 in a row? Now they had two, obviously in 2023. They had one in 2024. Do they get it again? And is it at a position that has already had a 5-star in recent history?
My answer is yes. My answer is yes.
Yeah, I
You're
agree.
asking me to throw the dart right now. I'm going to say yeah. And obviously, the question might be more, it might be phrased in more simple terms like this. Do the Sooners end up with Jonah Williams? Because,
Well, I didn't want to go there, but okay, cool.
yeah. And, I think they're in a very good spot. Now,
Correct.
I think it helps having a guy like Brandon Hall, who has landed a 5-star and has been through the drama before, running point in that recruitment, right? Because he knows that at no point in the process can you take anything for granted, and you got to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, regardless of the kid's commitment status, until National Signing Day. And so, having been through the fire with Peyton Bowen, and that was a fire of Book of Daniel proportions. Uh, having been through that, I have full confidence that he's going to be able to lead Oklahoma through the peaks and valleys of the Jonah Williams recruitment. It certainly helps that the Sooners were early to offer him, one of the first. And it also helps that they've given him the opportunity to play baseball as well. He's a heck
Yeah.
of a two-sport athlete. And so that will have some appeal as well, I would think.
I look at OU was down there. Brandon Hall was down there last week watching Jonah Williams play basketball again. I think that's the second or third basketball game that Hall's been to in the last few months. So like it's he's a priority. I think you can't overlook Amarian Robinson, who will also be there this weekend. You can't overlook Wimberly out of Arkansas, who just obviously got an offer. Oklahoma's been around there. And I know when it comes to the safeties, I think Tegoi is way up there. Um, Obviously Robinson, Williams, and Wimberly. I think if it was me, I think that seems to be who Oklahoma is pushing the hardest for right now. Now, I know there's still Riaz is out there as well, and I think Oklahoma really likes him. I think they're pushing hard for him as well. Those would be kind of the five safeties that when you look at in 2025 that you say, okay, that's it. They're going to get one of those five. And you feel pretty confident in that just because Coach Hall has landed whoever he wanted in the recent memory. Like if he wants you, he's got you in the past few classes. So you got to feel pretty confident with that position as well. I think defensive line and offensive line. I know there was a question in there. How many offensive line is Oklahoma going to take? And somebody asked if Oklahoma was going to take six. Can you see Oklahoma taking six offensive linemen in 2025? I think
No,
five is a good
no.
number. 4 or 5 is probably a good number to stop at right there, right?
I
They're
would
going to
say
return almost everybody.
I would say 3 or 4. Like five feels like a ton. 6 feels like an overload because if you look at the scholarship chart, you look at the scholarship breakdown, you have, I believe, 8 guys heading into the 2024 season that have all 4 years of eligibility remaining, and another 2 or 3 that have 3 years of eligibility remaining. So
Yeah.
you do have a ton of young depth. And obviously you will lose a guy or two to the transfer portal. Like that's just going to happen. I couldn't tell you who it is, but by the time season's end rolls around at the end of 2024,
It's going to be obvious.
there will be some guys that have concluded that there is no viable path to playing time for them at Oklahoma. And some of those, no doubt, will come from the offensive line. So that's something you have to account for. It's something you have to expect. You have one offensive line commit in the 2025 class right now as things stand in Owen Hollenbeck. I believe the Sooners get at least 2 more, probably 3. I think it's a 4-man class. If I had to bet right now, I'd say it's a 4-man class. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. And I guess the question is does Oklahoma get a 5-star? I'll say, yeah, I think they do. I think you saw today Oklahoma visited Michael Fasusi with Brent Venables, Seth Luttrell, and Bill Bedenbow. He obviously isn't going to be there in the next few weeks, right? Before the dead period rolls back around. But he will be there in March. Like that is something he's told me. I'm visiting Oklahoma in March. So this narrative of Fasusi is in Oklahoma or like fading is it's false. Oklahoma's still in a really good standing there. And I would probably put them near the top.
Hey,
Uh,
in March of 2022, Peyton Bowen was visiting like Alabama and Texas A&M, and
and he
I
was
don't even
committed to
remember
Notre
who else.
Dame.
Exactly. So like just take it easy. Just because a kid's
Mm-hmm.
visiting other places doesn't mean he's not going to Oklahoma. And look, like, it's going to be an arduous battle for Michael
Oh yeah.
Vasusi and Lamont Rogers, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you can,
Probably
you
Ty
can,
Haywood too.
yeah, you throw Ty Haywood in the mix. Look, you can do immaculate recruiting work these days with elite prospects, and when push comes to shove, they're going to take the money. Not that's not in every case, but in some cases, look no further than the Williams Nwaneri recruitment, right? As a prime example, or the DJ Hicks recruitment. Like you can push and push and push and push and put yourself in a really, really good spot with a guy, but you always have to account for that enormous swing variable, if you will, which is the money factor. And for 5 stars, it's always going to come into play.
Yeah.
Always. Even if they're not, even if it doesn't move the needle for them. And those guys do tend to be a little bit more uncommon than guys for whom it does move the needle. But you get a Jackson Arnold, right, who just is completely unworried about his NIL earnings because he knows that wherever he goes, when he's the starting quarterback, he's making far more money than they could have promised him at the outset.
Mm-hmm.
But unless you get a guy like that where, it just doesn't move the needle for him, and it doesn't move the needle for him, it's something you always have to be cognizant of. And the market for offensive linemen, especially offensive tackles, is a little bit wild right now. Tennessee and Zalance Hurd being a very recent example of just how out of control that market has become. So I
Yeah.
have no doubt that other schools are going to throw large sums of money at Michael Fasusi and Lamont Rogers to sweeten the deal.
I agree. I think the thing that Oklahoma has going for them is they're going to throw out and I think it's also interesting that we're talking about this on the heels of OU's collective becoming very present on social media again. I think they've heard some of the what do you want to call it? I guess detractions that have been thrown their way, some of the critiques thrown their way, and how they're not out there, how they're not selling it. And I think if you would, the people were saying if they sold it more, then yeah, then more people would donate and all that type of stuff. Well, they're out there. They're tweeting multiple times a day right now, and they're running, that 2 month trying to get 2,000 people to sign up to help pay for the collective. And that I think people need to also understand that doesn't mean the collective's broke. It's far from it. I think what they want is the donors that have been helping fund the collective would like some help from the fans that are loud and boisterous about it. And if they want players to be paid for more or whatever, then yes, you're going to have to, as a fan base, as a whole, come together, whether it's donors, whether it's everyday fans, all that type of stuff. Everything matters now that you've moved to the SEC. Every little thing matters. And I think that's where it's at. And when you look at the offensive tackles, I think Oklahoma will be able to throw out a very competitive. They could throw out as much as Tennessee in those guys. The thing is Venables isn't going to do it. Beanbo's not going to do it. Like at the end of the day, if you go to the University of Oklahoma and play offensive line, the numbers speak for itself, Parker, where long term, you're going to make far more than you can make in a 2 or 3 year span at the University of Oklahoma. That's just the facts. Like, it's great. You're making $500,000. You made $1.5 million. That's not even the signing bonus for if you play for Beatonbow 90% of the time. So, like, what? That's the funny part is like, but everybody is in a now state. We're so now that everybody wants the money now. They don't want to wait and believe in themselves. And I think that's the interesting part is you got some people that actually will bet on themselves and they end up making more money in the long run. And I think those are the type of guys that generally work for Beatonbow and they pan out for Beatonbow because they're his type of guys. They're the grinders. And so I do think that Fasusi is a grinder. I've heard his work ethic is awesome. I've heard Rogers' work ethic is awesome. We all know that the Denton Ryan guys, their work ethic is going to be ridiculous because all of them are that way. So with Ty Haywood. So I think they've got a good base in the DFW area to really go pinpoint the offensive line. I think where you have an issue in 25 is that D-line isn't that deep in this region, not like it was in 24. And so you said it's called Breeler? Is that what it is? Breeler?
Breeler. Yep.
Yeah. So you got Cole Breeler coming down from New Jersey. You got Landon Rink coming up from South Texas. He's a Texas legacy. He's visited Oklahoma a lot. Just wouldn't hold my breath there. Um, but Breelers, you got guys on the East Coast that Oklahoma's in on, a couple guys in the Georgia, Florida, North Carolina region that Oklahoma's in a good spot for. Tennessee. That's probably where you're going to get a lot. And if not, from what I've heard, Oklahoma's either they're going to swing. There's not going to be a lot of going to B and C like you could in 24 and get a similar talent. It's if you miss A and you miss B, you're going to the portal because that's what you got to do. The class is not deep enough to do that. I think it is deep enough at safety. I think it is deep enough at offensive line, deep enough at running back, deep enough at wide receiver. We've already seen that, right, with the class that Emmett Jones has put together. But it's not deep enough deep enough on the defensive line, and that's where portal guys, as far as defensive tackles after the 2024 season, are going to come at a premium, a big premium, Parker. So, let's talk basketball. That was rough. That was rough, Parker. Did it not look like when shots stopped falling, probably, and they weren't falling the whole game, but when they really stopped falling, like layups, and I do want to say this. They're so athletic, they've got to figure out to get run some motion offense. Like that's number one. Number two, they're giving up layups to pass out for 3-pointers. Like literally, there was Uzan and McCollum a couple times up underneath the basket. All you have to do is lay it in, and they're dishing it out for corner threes. And I get it. Sometimes that's a smart move, but why not take the two and just live to fight another day, particularly when you're shooting that bad? Because it looked like about 8 minutes into the second half, they just quit. They weren't trying to get offensive rebounds, not trying to get defensive rebounds. They were letting dudes just drive down the lane. It just seemed like there was no life in that team. And I've never seen a Moser team play that way, Parker, ever. Have you? Not even the bad ones.
Yeah. Yeah. On a couple of occasions. I have. I mean, there have been a lot of bad games over the first 2 years of the Moser era at Oklahoma because they just weren't that talented, at least comparative to what they have right now. And I think that's what's most concerning about the performance last night is there was so much there were so many reasons to get up for this game, right? Packed house at the LNC, you're undefeated in that building to this point in the season, knocking on the door of the AP top 10. The opposing team is down lately, not out, but down. Lost a couple of games they probably shouldn't have lost. Their cornball head coach made a fool of himself in front of the entire Twitterverse. Like you had every reason to go and dominate that football game, or not football game, that basketball game. You had every reason to get out on your home floor, come out with juice, come out with some competitive fire, and bury that Texas team. And the Sooners had opportunities to do that, man. Like Texas obviously played well enough to win. They didn't play great. Like that was a very winnable game. And I think that is the most damning indictment amidst it all is that it was not as if the Longhorns just came out and blitzed Oklahoma start to finish. It's not as if they absolutely objectively were going to win that basketball game regardless of how Oklahoma played. No, Oklahoma had myriad opportunities to seize control of that game, and they just didn't do it.
Yeah. So, and I don't think this had anything to do with it, but it just drove me absolutely bonkers. And that was more or less seeing Disu just hook every time he would go to spin. He would literally hook right in front of the official, like wide, like his whole arm around whatever OU defender. I'm sitting there going, that is a call 99% of the time except for today. That was crazy. It didn't matter because OU just didn't play well. And when you don't play well, the officials are going to call it against you. And so OU's to blame on that. At home, mind you, at home. They kind of blew it themselves. Hatchett. Let's talk about Geirean Hatchett. By the way, I do think Oklahoma beats Texas Tech this weekend. So if you're an Oklahoma fan, show up, show out, support your team. If they win, they're still going to be a top 15 team in the country. And they're probably still going to be a 4-5 seed in the NCAA tournament right now. So nobody expected that. This is still a really good team, 15-4 right now. Really good team. People are asking about Geirean Hatchett.
Yeah.
The Washington transfer offensive line. Visited this past weekend. Loved the visit. Oklahoma finished second for him out of high school. Finished second for his brother. Just things have just never materialized there, and just never has. He's met with. I think right now there's no news to announce, other than they're making a decision. He's not obviously in the student database, so he hasn't enrolled. So there's that. So the longer this thing drags out, the more you kind of feel like he's going to stay at Washington with his brother. His brother could not make it down with him. Things didn't work out. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, Oklahoma did all they could. They threw out a good NIL package for him. But he may just want to play another year or two with his brother at Washington if that's really the case. And they just went to the national title. Obviously, they got a new head coach and Jed Fish, but the kid grew up in Washington. It makes a lot of sense, right? Like if he stayed there. But no decision. I just want to reiterate, no decision's been made. Like they've met with Washington. They've met with Oklahoma. They're still talking. We'll see. We'll see. I just wouldn't hold my breath. Like it felt like it was going to happen. And then when no decision was made by the time they left, you kind of figured this thing's kind of up in the air. And that's really not a good sign with portal guys if they leave and start meeting with their former team and or another team. They haven't met with anybody else. They haven't visited anybody else, but they have met with Washington. And that's where it stands. I mean, is that a horrible loss, Parker? It's not great, but I don't think it's the end of the world because you still got a spring transfer cycle coming up.
Well, and it's not a loss if you never had the guy in the first place, right?
Correct.
Like It's just another guy that you made a run at, and ultimately factors that were beyond your control kept him from transferring to your institution. Which again, like there's still a chance this gets done, right? Like the ship hasn't sailed completely, but objectively, it stands to reason that the longer this drags out, the more likely it is that Hatchett and his brother just stay back in Washington where they have roots. And so on paper, I'll say this, it would not make a ton of sense for a Washington kid who's got a younger brother that would not be joining him in Norman to transfer 1,200 miles away to play his final 2 years of college football. Again, doesn't mean it's impossible. I say it every week. Recruiting will surprise you at times. And the portal will certainly surprise you at times in much more accelerated fashion. But if he returns to Washington, you understand it, right? Kind of like Geno Vandermark going back to Michigan State. And no, you don't like it. Like, wish you would have had the guy, but you understand his decision. It's not as if somebody dropped a bag and stole him out from under your nose, pulled the rug out from underneath you. No, the kid had or would have legitimate reasons to go back to his previous institution. It is what it is.
Yeah, and look, there's a question. Any Michigan guys that Oklahoma needs to keep an eye on? I mean, if Sharon Moore is named the head coach, I don't think so. I think everybody stays. He's beloved, absolutely beloved in that locker room. He recruited a lot of those offensive linemen, if not all of them. And so, like,
I'd bet the portal casualties would be close to zero.
Yeah, maybe 3 or 4 at most. At most. And that's, I think the casualties you would have more than anything else is a 24 class deflections than you would anything else. Because I just the guys that have been around there, that have been a part of that culture, that know what Sharon Moore brings to the table, and have been around him for multiple seasons, I just can't see them leaving. But I've seen crazier things. Everybody, I would love to know why Sharon Moore would not be welcome back in Norman. That would be an interesting thing. I guess maybe I'm missing something. Uh, Parker, is there anything else to talk about today? Like as far as what's going on in the world? Covered junior days. I do want to give a shout out to our former owner, Brian Bishop, who will be having the memorial Friday, 1 p.m. at Life Church in Moore. Um, 20, 25 years, I believe he ran the site
Yep,
before
25 years.
before he sold it off to Parker and I. And he created a lot of this industry in part of the OU website beat. Like they were one of the originals. And he's very influential. If you haven't read his obituary, I think you need to, because the guy helped create the first Nike town. Like how crazy is that? He's helped do so many things. Like you talk about a guy that is well versed in life, Brian Bishop. So, um, RIP to former boss man. And that's about all I want to say about that. So,
Yeah.
anyways, um, all right, man. Well, I think that's gonna do it. We've gone about 50 minutes. This is good. Well, it's gonna be a longer one next week, just because of junior day notes and all that type of stuff. The coaches are out on the road, and we've got a lot of that covered on OU Insider. It's been multiple notes that have gone up over the last few days. Parker's put up notes. I've put up notes. There's a lot of transfer stuff. There's a lot of mailbag stuff, really in-depth questions that some of y'all ask on here. Well, we've got those on OU Insider VIP. And I mean, really verse questions of who we think Oklahoma is going to get in the 25 class, where they stand with some of the 5 stars that they're after, where OU stands with a lot of these visitors coming in. That's on OU Insider VIP. So it's $9.99 a month. There's you see, the 400 or 500, the sometimes 12, 1,500 people that are on this. That didn't come close to the members that are on OU Insider. And that's because of you all, the fans. And we do that for you all. And we thank you guys so very much for allowing us to do this job that we love dearly. So thank you guys so much for subscribing here. So if you can do that, subscribe here, and also go support us at ouinsider.com. $9.99 a month, or you can sign up a whole year and get all the way through basically the second signing day of 2025 right now for $99.95. All right, that's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor YouTube Live. For Parker Thune, for Spencer Forsythe, my name is Brandon Drum. You guys have a blessed day.